Hi, I'm Red Renchin, Technical Editor of the American Farriers Journal. I'm Red Renchin, Technical Editor of the American Farriers Journal. Hi, I'm Red Renchin, Technical Editor of the American Farriers Journal. I've been a practicing farrier for over 40 years, a member of the Horseshoeing Hall of Fame and the Anvil 21 Club. For this video, what we're going to do...
For those who never got to meet Red, what can you share with them about him professionally and personally? What does the new generation not know about him?
There's a lot of things. Things have changed so much. When I started doing this 38 years ago, when I first started for Red, and I went up into his shop, and I know a lot of you guys have seen his shop, I've never seen so many horseshoes in my life. And I just can't believe this. And then he would go to the one in Louisville, what was that called? Bluegrass. Yeah, the Bluegrass. And you're sitting in the lectures and you're learning about this and that, a little different than what he's doing. And then you go to the trade show and there's different shoes. And he was always eager to try something new. He loved that shoe, he's gonna try it. So he'd take these shoes home and we'd try that and he liked them. And all them shoes that were in his shop are now hanging in the shop forever. Yeah. And after you got these shoes, and I don't want to mention the names of the shoes and get people mad at me, but he would use those shoes for a while. Then he'd go back to another trade show the next year and there's different shoes. And boy, he really likes those and he tries those. And then all them other shoes he's got are still hanging in the shop. And just like hammers, aprons, everything, he always tried everything. And I mean, every time he went somewhere, he tried all the new stuff. Yeah. And things changed. When I first started years ago, these were the best shoes. They don't even have these shoes anymore. Yeah. You know, they changed a lot. Just like the pads. I mean, Red didn't like leather pads. And then he loved the leather pads, and we were using leather pads. And he had all these Castle plastic pads sitting there. And then all of a sudden, he didn't like the leather pads anymore. He can't reset them. No, then leather's done and he's back to plastic. Well, then the pads have changed a little bit. So I don't know, it's really hard to make a comment on that because things drastically change a lot.
Right. Oh yeah, and he that was the one thing that always kind of stuck with me with Red was he never hesitated to try something new. He was very open-minded. There's a lot of discussion within the industry about gimmicks and stuff like that. He was willing to give it a shot. If it was a gimmick, it was a gimmick. He wouldn't use it anymore. But if it was a keeper and helped him help horses, that's all that mattered.
Absolutely. I don't know, you've seen his anvil.
Yeah.
Now, most farriers out there, when they come to the barn and they're looking at me working, they're standing there looking at my anvil like, what the hell is that? And they're watching me. And I said, well, you know Red Renchin? Yeah, that's one of his anvils, isn't it? Yeah. Now, Red would go to these trade shows and there was a new anvil and it really looked neat and he'd buy it and he'd bring it home. He'd use it for a day and hate it and go back to his old homemade anvil. And for me, when I first started, that's the anvil I learned on. I couldn't even shape a shoe on those anvils. And it's a huge difference. They're lighter. You know, now even at the end he put aluminum base on. I still have one of those with an aluminum base. But completely different than any anvil you're gonna find at any store anywhere.
What's different about it? Besides the weight?
They're completely, now people that are really good blacksmiths, they can shape a shoe on those, over the horns of those anvils. I really couldn't do that because he had the back of the anvil where if you had a big shoe, medium-sized shoe, small shoe, really small shoe, you could put it on there and you could adjust it to anything. You have seen his anvils, right? Yeah. Well, you try and do that on these other anvils, I couldn't do it. Now, if I started, like if I went to a farrier school, they're not gonna let you use that anvil. Maybe it would have been good, I could have learned better there, but yeah, it was
He wouldn't have hired you
different.
then.
What?
Then he wouldn't have hired you if you went to
Exactly. But he did always take us to all of the schools. The Bluegrass one and then when the International Hoof Care Summit started, we went every single year. And he always wanted you to get together. Roy Bloom, everybody knows Roy Bloom, he's over there pounding on the anvil, and Red would grab a hold of me and say, get over there and watch that. And then Roy would talk to you, and you'd talk to Roy. And Red said every time you went anywhere, you can pick up anything from anybody. And he took us everywhere, and we always did that. Yeah. And Todd Gillis didn't work for Red Renchin, but he worked for Mike Ehlert, and he has been coming every single year. He's never missed this once. And the same thing back in Louisville when Dr. Redden was doing that.
Tell us a little bit about Red's early years that you know of, anyway. In terms of, and he grew up in Minnesota. Do you know how he got into horses at all?
When I met him, he was here in Wisconsin, but I do remember him saying that he was working on horses in Minnesota. Not sure why he moved here, but once he got here, he really got busy and really booked up really fast, and that's why he had to hire somebody. And the first guy that he ever hired was Mike Ehlert, and I don't know how many years Mike Ehlert worked with him. And then Mike went off on his own, and then I think it was Jim Andrews, and then Todd Gillis was a farrier that then worked with Mike Ehlert. And Red and I used to see Mike and Todd all the time. And it was just Mike and Todd. They did plenty together. But for Red, 2 wasn't enough. He'd hire a third guy, and then he just kept getting busier and busier. And then it was up to 4 guys that he had. And then he had 2 different trucks. And he sent me and another guy off in one truck. And then him and another guy went a different direction. And then when he went to Florida, I stayed home here and kept going here while he was in Florida in the wintertime. Sure. So I'm not sure what moved him here from Minnesota, but as soon as he got here, he got really busy. He was very good.
What were the breeds and disciplines that Red predominantly shod?
He did a lot. He did hunters and jumpers were the biggest, dressage horses. He also had couple barns of polo horses that we did. Didn't like that, but Red always said, polo horses are tough horses, they gotta be. Mm-hmm. And so they were tougher to work on than a lot of the horses, but most of the horses were good to work on. And if there was a horse that was difficult to work on, Red did it, not us. And then he would teach us again the horsemanship on how to handle a horse when he's working on it. So, and that was from day one, you started learning that. You know, we talked about that before, but he was very, very strict on proper horsemanship.
You had mentioned earlier he went to Florida. For the reference of our audience, he was going to Florida to work.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, tell us about what he was doing down there.
Yeah, he went to, the first 2 years when I went with him, he went to West Palm Beach, and we worked all day long. A bunch of his customers from here went down to Florida for the wintertime. And he kept going down there and shoeing the horses all winter long. And the first 2 years I went down there, after that, he kept me home working here, keeping things going here, and then he took the next guy to go down to Florida with him. And I don't remember what year that was, but he's been going to Florida ever since.
How did he choose his clients? Did he put them through any sort of process to figure out whether this would be a good fit?
It wasn't really him that chose the clients chose him. There was some clients that, I'm not saying he wouldn't take them, but when you're so busy, he's going to a barn and he's doing almost every horse that's in that barn, and he doesn't want to take off, unpack everything, go to another barn, unpack everything, and do just 1 or 2 horses. It just wasn't worth it. A lot of his customers that were his customers for years would move to another barn for whatever reason, and he would go there to do just those couple of horses, and then other people there want him to do it, and then pretty soon, instead of doing 2 horses, he's doing 10, then 12, then he's doing the whole barn. And you just get busier and busier doing that. And he did do some just backyard horses that were close by his house, neighbors and stuff like that. But they pretty much picked him. And it depends, you know, how busy he is, if he's got room to take any more clients. If he doesn't, he just can't. You know, that's when I first started, it was 3 of us, and then it was 4 of us. And for a while there was, I think, 5 or 6. He hired one guy, Matt Jones, that's a farrier now too, that just did all of the work in the shop for him. And he liked it. And then Kenny Krieger came, and Kenny went with me in one truck, and Red went with another truck, and still had guys at home making shoes at home because he was getting that busy. So it went up and down a lot that way. You know, he couldn't get that busy, and then he leaves for Florida, and then there's no way I can get all those horses done that are still here. So sometimes he couldn't hire on anymore, you know, or take on any more clients.
Would he drop clients?
That's really hard for me to answer that. Yeah, some clients were dropped. Do I know if he dropped them or if he got dropped? I don't really know. I know some of them he dropped. And just like anything, you know, they say you have to do this. And Red would say, well, that wouldn't help this horse. And if you really think that's what you need, you can hire somebody else to do it that way, but I can't do that. And if he didn't feel confident doing something, it wasn't right to do. And a lot of times, those people would switch to somebody because this is what they wanted and he wouldn't do it. And it wouldn't be 1 or 2 times that horse got shod and he got called back to be hired back. And they said, okay, we're sorry, Red, do what you were doing. So he was that good. I can't remember the client's name and I don't want to say it anyways. Sure. But every time we shod her horse, she complained. Like, Red, why did you change the shoes? I didn't. Reset them, same shoes. No, you didn't. It's completely different. And Red would say, well, what's wrong? He just came out of there and took first place. What's wrong with him? There's nothing wrong. Yeah, there is. I don't know why you're doing that. I hate when you change that every time. She complained every time he did it. And I remember after being with Red for years, I asked him, how can you stand doing that horse with that lady? And he said, well, I just keep raising the price every time. The horse is great. He's a good horse to work on. And he used to always say the nice thing about my job, and I agreed with this 100% when I went on my own, is I have to deal with her today, and then I don't have to see her for 6 weeks. And then I got to deal with her again for 6 weeks, and then I'm out of there. And every time she complains, I raise the price a little bit. And she never complained about it. But that was one of the issues. Yeah, that was, and he told me that too. Just like there's a horse you don't like and it's difficult to work on, you only do him today, then you don't have to deal with him for 6 weeks or 4 weeks, 5 weeks. All the horses are different. Like some jobs, if you go there and I work with you and I can't stand you and you can't stand, I see you every day. That's what was nice about this job. I'm going to see you today and then not again for 6 weeks. So he really enjoyed that.
One of the cool things I came across a few years ago, but I didn't realize this came from Red, was the horseshoe, the bending machine.
Oh.
Tell us about that.
That again, we were at, I think it was Cincinnati, and Grant Moon had this machine, and we were walking by, and Red is standing like this, and he's staring at this machine, and I walk by, and Grant Moon is taking this, so it's hydraulics. Instead of swinging your hammer, and he had some tennis elbow issues at the time, so he is really interested in this thing. And he's watching Grant Moon do this on this machine. And Red says, well, okay, now it's not flattened out. How do you flatten it out? No problem. Sets it in here and presses the thing down, flattens it out. Red's like, man, that thing's incredible. I got to try that. He bought it.
Yeah.
The first one, he bought that thing. We got it back home, and that thing sat there for months.
Yeah.
And I'm asking Red, are you going to use this machine? Nah, you guys are gone, and I'm practicing trying this thing in the shop, and I just can't get it figured out. It's just not right. And he never really took it to the barns and used it, but he did practice with it at home.
Yeah.
and I forget the name of the guy that has it now. Still
it's Chris,
uses
isn't
it.
it?
Yeah,
Chris Dickens.
Chris Adix. Yeah,
Adix, pardon me.
He still has it.
Yeah.
As far as I know, Chris still uses that
Yeah.
thing. Now Matt Jones, when he was the 5th guy that he hired or whatever, he was in the shop all day, and he was making this. Red got this hydraulic machine, and he had all these different patterns, narrow, wide, wider, and he had all of these hooked up for the hydraulic machine. And Matt would be in the shop making all these shoes. So when you get to the barn, and it's a real wide pancake shoe, I forget what he called them, A, B, or C, he'd tell you, go grab me size 3A. And you go in the truck and you grab size 3A, and it's almost right on there. You barely have to shape it much and get it fitted. So it was much faster doing them. And then he did the hydraulics with the front feet, the back feet, but it was in the shop only. He didn't take it in the truck. And that's where he had Matt working in the shop all day, Monday through Friday in the shop. And then Kenny Krieger and myself and Red and I forget who else. There was a bunch of guys. Were out doing the horses. So yeah, that hydraulic machine he had in his shop. Yeah. And he had a bunch of different plates. It was really a pretty neat setup. Yeah. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I did.
It was incredible.
Chris had it at Centaur Forge a few years ago. That's where I saw it for the first time.
No, that was the one that just shaped the shoes.
Oh, okay.
But the one he had in the shop, Kelly House used to work for him.
Right.
And then when Red passed away, Kelly has that now at his shop.
Okay.
I don't know if he still uses it, but he has it.
All right. Tell us about the profiles that he had of all the horses he worked on with this.
Well, the majority of the time when he got this hydraulic machine set up, I was still with him, working with him. Right at the end, when I was leaving, is when he really started to broaden this out. He had so many different patterns that he made. So certain horses that had difficult feet, he had so many different patterns, so it didn't take as much time because he had patterns that were almost close. What he would do is shape a shoe for this horse, and then he would take it back to the shop, and he would have Matt make the platform for this shoe, so it's done on the hydraulic machine. So the next time he goes to do this horse, that shoe is almost done and ready to go. And he did a lot of those. How many he did, I don't know, because I wasn't with him anymore there. But I remember meeting him at the barn sometimes and just talking with him and seeing all these different patterns that he had. Huh. Yeah.
So Matt, would Matt punch the shoes for nails, or were they already pre-punched?
No, they were pre-punched.
Okay.
It was shaped. Some of the bar shoes too was the same thing, and they were all ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Now the prototype that he bought from Grant, that one's kind of like the first thing that I thought of when I saw it was it's almost like a table saw type size.
Yep.
It wasn't real big.
Right.
What was the one that Red? What was that one like as far as the size and where?
He got some old. When I was still there, they were old hydraulic pumps, and he had them set up on the side, and then I think he had 2 different pumps. One would be closing the shoes from the side and the other from the top. Yeah. So you do it at the same time, and he would just get the shoe shaped to however the cast was that Matt was making. Yeah. And sometimes it would take Matt a while to do that, because you make it, you put it on there, you put the shoe in there, and then Red would come look at it and say, no, you got to bring it in a little more, or rounder at the top, or more square, or whatever. And then once Matt got it done, Red would label it, and all of his patterns were labeled different. And in his shop on the wall, he had all these different patterns hanging on the wall. And I couldn't believe, after I left, and then every once in a while I went and I talked to him, and I went to the shop and I walked in and I thought, oh my God, what is all this? And then Red showing me and explaining everything. I'm like, oh my God. But it made a big difference when you go to the barn. It's a lot faster.
Yeah.
Especially with the funny shaped feet.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it had a cam in the middle, so that
Yep.
it would bend
Yep.
it would bend the bar stock or
Yep.
bend the shoe to that particular shape.
Yep.
Yeah, we didn't have to heat it up or anything like that.
No, well, yeah, you did heat
You did
some
have
of
to
them.
heat
Yeah.
some of them up. Okay.
But he had a big forge in the shop, and it was a
Okay.
lot easier, less stress on the pumps, on the hydraulics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, he did do that. I remember asking him. We sat in a lecture with Gene Ovenick from Colorado, and just basically, Gene Ovenick is you make the shoe like this, and then Randy Luccar is the next lecture, and it's the exact opposite of what Gene just said. Like if the foot's this big, I put a shoe on like this. And I get done with that lecture, and Todd's looking at me like, you gotta be kidding me. We just listened to Gene, and this is kind of how Red does things, square the toe, not square, but broaden the toe and set it back for the breakover. And Randy Luccart's the exact opposite. And Randy Luccar is so smart. I remember talking to him sitting at the table, and he said to me, okay, just let me ask you some questions. Because I'm asking, I work with Red Renchin. He said, yeah, I know. And you do that square toe and breakover crap, I know. And he shoes horses and they're sound, I get it. And I said, okay, well, I don't understand why you putting this great big shoe on this horse. And he says to me, okay, here's the teeter-totter. You're 500 pounds and you're 100 pounds. And here's the center. Can you guys teeter? What happens? You sit like this, right? It's a fact. It's a fact. The only way you can teeter is if you move this to here. Now the 500 pounder's right here. Now you can teeter, right? Correct. It's true. He said, okay, now you take the radiograph of the foot and you watch these slow motion horses come over the fence and land. Why would you have a great big horse, a big warm blood with a foot like this, reduce that down to this for the breakover? He's landing. He needs the support. Physics-wise, he does. And I'm sitting there like, God, okay, I agree. I have to agree. It's fact. And then I get out of there and I go right up to Red. Hey, come here. He goes, no, I heard your conversation with Randy Luccar. I'm not going there. He said, because number one, you can't disagree with the thing he said, right? And I said, yeah. So are we going to go home and forget that breakover and put that great big shoe on there? And he goes, no. And I said, okay, Red, I have to know. What is the difference? Why? It's completely different. Why are these horses that you put the shoe on sound, and so are the ones Randy Luccar does sound? What does that tell you? And he says, that tells you how compatible the horses are and what they can put up with. It's amazing. But then Randy Luccar also said, and he asked Red this, how many times do you have issues with the back end of these horses when you're putting that square toe shoe on? When they get to be 15, 16, they're starting to have a lot of issues. Randy said, not mine. Not mine. Once in a while. And so I asked Red when we left, I said, when we get home, are we going to put bigger shoes on like that? And he said, no. So you disagree with Randy Luccar? And he said, no, I don't. I can't. But I've been doing this for so many years. He also said, I don't go as far back as Gene does. But when you're a beginner and you sit in the lecture hall and you see an hour of Gene Ovenick and then the next hour is Randy Luccar and they're complete opposites, that's confusing. I mean, but that to me was amazing. And I sat there and talked to Randy for 15 minutes. And it's almost like he's just cutting me down. Because everything he said is true and it's factual, Mm-hmm. So I just like, okay, Randy, I lose. I'm out of here. But anyway.
Describe his impact on the industry and the guys who worked with him, and how they trained it. He trained you and put you into business and whatnot.
Well, I think it was absolutely incredible. If you look around this area almost all of the farriers, well, maybe not anymore because I'm done, but a lot of them were apprentices from Red. And Red would help every single one that was out there if they had issues. He helped everybody. And you know, you work with him I was with him for 10 years. I was with him longer than anybody, which he said was really dumb. I should have been out of there earlier, but anyway, a lot of guys were only there a few years with him and then they're on their own.
Yeah.
And then when Red passed away, Kelly House is still out there and he's still in the area. Chris Adix is out there. Mm-hmm. Mike Ehlert's still out there. He's still shoeing horses. Todd Gillis didn't work for Red, but he went with Red everywhere, you know, to the International Healthcare Summit every year and down to Louisville and all of the farrier conventions all over the place. So most of the farriers in this area are because of Red.
Yeah.
He was incredible.
How are you today, Red?
I am very good. Never been better. In fact, you've made my whole day here.